Okay, let's talk about foam printing. I have some examples that are really good here, and I just want to talk about them for a second. This is an example of a Pac-Man ghost, and you can see that the artist did the drawing first on graph paper to get that pixelated feel. And then what they did is they taped it onto a full sheet of foam to do the tracing. So the full sheets are about this size. So you can see you probably could cut a full sheet in half to get that. And what you do is you tape it on and you trace it onto the foam. Now, this is the one time in class I'm going to let you use a pencil that's not too sharp, so you don't need it really, really pointy, and you definitely don't want to use a mechanical pencil. Once you have your drawing done on a normal piece of paper, so I would use thin paper, that way it'll go through easier, you can then trace that onto your foam. All the foam sheets are about half a regular sheet of paper. Okay, so this is the only size I have at this time. So when you're tracing it down, you want to make sure that you have it taped and you kind of just trace over your image. And I'm going to show how to do that in just a moment. But for now, I just want you to think about the differences of the way to make to do your foam drawing. So if you see this ghost, you can see that it's been cut out, and this is an example of what it looked like when the artist printed it before it was cut out. So you have this rectangular shape here around it, as opposed to this where it's been cut out and you don't have the rectangle around it. So that's just something to think about as you're creating your drawing. Here's another example of one that's been cut out. So the artist did the drawing, then taped it onto the foam, then traced it, and then printed it out. And it's in the shape of this person with a big scarf, rather than a rectangular shape. Here are some examples of one that hasn't been cut out. This is important and significant because this is where you can really see how the letters need to be flipped and then the words also rotated. So you can see how it's been printed. You need to do your drawing if you have any important information that has to be flipped or rotated because the orientation needs to be correct. So this is obviously words are the biggest example where that's the case. If you have a hard time drawing bubble letters or thinking about bubble letters that are drawn backwards, if that's hard for you to see, I have these nifty handouts. Here, I have 2 copies, but I can make more, and it's just in the printmaking cabinet, and you can see how the letters are all backwards. Okay, so let's say you have your drawing done, and you want to start tracing onto the foam. I just want to show you how to do that. This is just an example that I started. It's just a little abstract drawing. I haven't even finished it, but just for the sake of showing you how to do this. What you want to do is you want to tape your paper onto the foam, and it should be the same size. This is a little too, the paper's a little too small, so I could cut it down or just get a bigger piece of paper, but I already started my drawing here. So let's say you're ready to start tracing. Your drawing should be done. What I do is I tape it on so it doesn't move around, and then I just kind of go over my drawing. So I'm pushing hard enough that I know it's going to go through to the foam. Now the point of this is that once you have made your mark on the foam here, you cannot erase it. So it's really important to get a drawing done first on paper, because if you just try to draw straight onto the foam and you make a mistake, you have to throw that foam away and start over. You can't change the indentations that you make into this foam. Now once you've traced your whole drawing, when you flip it over, you're going to see it's not actually that deep. It needs to go in pretty deep for the lines to show up when you're printing. So it's a good idea to go over your whole drawing here. Okay, and I see double lines here, which makes me think that it moved a little bit while I was tracing. So I only put 1 piece of tape here just so I could flip back and forth to show you guys for the demo. But when you do this, you really want to tape it down because if it moves, then you're in trouble. Your lines aren't going to be straight. Okay, so once you've done your drawing, you've traced it onto your foam, you've gone over everything, it looks best to do some shading. So you can see here in this example that the shading is the white area. And then the rest is purple, so it's kind of the opposite of the drawing. Where the pencil marks are is where the color of the paper is. So if you don't have any shading, you end up with a lot of just ink, areas full of ink. So it's important to make sure you've got some shading in your foam. Okay, so if you're ready, if you have everything ready, your foam is ready, let's say you want to print. There are a couple options inside the printmaking cabinet for ink. I recommend Speedball. It's the best quality ink I have, and it comes in either jars, it's kind of hard to read, or tubes. For some reason, I have a ton of white tubes. This is white ink, and I have other colors also. Now, if you don't use Speedball, some of the other brands aren't as good and don't come out as nice. It doesn't mean that it won't work. It just means that some of the quality of the other brands aren't as good. So that's just something to keep in mind. And if you're not sure, you're welcome to ask me if I know that that brand is good or not. You're gonna find brayers. I would get one that's not, there's a bunch of different sizes. This is a good size. It's just a nice medium size. If you use a jar, you're gonna wanna get a spoon. That's all in the cabinet as well. And then there's a bunch of just trays. This is just a plastic tray. I don't have plexiglass. Be careful because sometimes there's a little plastic that sticks out. This little circle in the middle can show up when you're rolling your brayer. I actually like to roll on the side that has, if the plastic can stay nice and flat on the table, you tend to be able to roll it a little bit better. I don't know that it's flat on either side, but I'm gonna go for this side. If you use the tube, you're gonna squirt the ink out and roll onto your tray. Now, before you do that, you need to make sure you have some things. You need a lot of just goose paper, so paper that's good on one side, or even newsprint. Big sheets of newsprint is fine. But it's really messy. The biggest challenge in this is keeping everything clean because the ink kind of wants to go everywhere. So get a little stack of goose paper for your printing. You're also gonna wanna make sure that you have your paper that you're gonna print on ready. I found these really beautiful sheets of dark blue paper, so I'm gonna do white ink on this dark blue and see how that comes out. It's good to have a few sheets handy because you'll probably be able to make a few prints at a time. And then you have your brayer, your ink, and then of course the foam that you will be printing. So I'm gonna go for this cityscape. I've printed this many, many times. You'll see that, you know, you gotta be careful. You don't want it to bend or wrinkle too much because then those lines start to show up. Once you're done printing with one color, I recommend you only do one color per class because it takes a lot to clean off all the ink and dry it. Please don't bend it when you're cleaning, okay? So you can change the color of your paper in one class, but you really don't want to change the color of your ink. It takes too long to clean. Okay, I'm gonna get started with rolling. I'm gonna squeeze some ink, a little line of ink on the top of my tray. And I'm gonna just start rolling. The goal is that you get your brayer nice and even with ink. This is a squeaky roller, but shouldn't be a problem as long as it's getting covered in ink. So you really don't want any black spots like that. So I'm gonna keep rolling until I get all those spots covered. Okay. All right, for the sake of time, we're gonna call that good enough. I think there's still a little bit of black spots showing, but let's just see how we roll this on. So when you're ready to roll, move the tray out of the way. You're gonna wanna get a sheet of goose paper. And you need a lot of space for this, so I would definitely move to a different table. And then let's roll this ink onto our print. I can tell already there's not enough ink there. So I'm gonna get my tray, roll a little more. I know you can't exactly see what I'm doing, but I'm just putting more ink on my brayer. And to be fair, the first print never comes out very good. Okay. I'm gonna actually squeeze a little bit more ink at the top of my tray here. I'll move this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. This is pretty thick, but so I'm gonna kind of spread it out. All right, let's go back. It's a little bit harder to see the white ink onto the white print or on the white foam. So you gotta really kind of look hard to see if the ink is on everything. Be very careful when holding the sides here of your foam because you're gonna get ink on your fingers. Now it's important to be totally set up early, or ahead of time rather, because this ink actually dries pretty fast. So you're not gonna wanna put the ink on and then go whoops and go try to get all your paper set up and everything. All right, so I'm gonna just go for it. I'm moving the goose paper out of the way because I do not want it to get on my good paper. Now I'm gonna get my good paper and I'm gonna take another sheet of goose paper. See what I mean by keeping things clean? I'm gonna flip this paper over because I already see stains on it. I'm gonna slide this goose paper under. Okay, so this looks pretty clean. I'm gonna try to put my print in the middle here. I'm gonna drop it. Once you drop it, just go for it, because you can't really move it around. Now this paper is really cool. I can actually see my drawing underneath it. So just try to rub the corners, rub everywhere, make sure that you're pushing hard and trying to get that ink onto your paper. And then I am gonna peel it back and let's see what we got. All right, pretty good. Now, this fingerprints, I guess I forgot to flip it. Something like that is not that big of a deal because I would probably cut this image down. But at this point, you're welcome to print as many as you can in a period. So, you know, you just keep making sure your goose paper is nice and clean underneath to avoid any fingerprints or any ink going anywhere you don't want it to go. And you can continue to print using different color paper, but the ink stick to the same color. Okay, that's a lot of information. Let me know if you have any questions.